Okay, so many notifications I keep getting. Do you want to allow this or that app to send you notifications? Do you want to allow this or that app to have access to? Right now, I have 2 that I won't close because I want to see what it is. The new map design and welcome to macOS Catlina. Take a tour. I haven't even closed. I want to look at it, but I'm like, I'm too busy working. I'll do it later.
I did that and I closed it. I just closed the iMessages because I wanted to know what new is there. And so then I closed it, went back to iMessages, and it was gone. I was really sad. I'm like, oh,
missed it. I know. Where do you even find that? If not like through that link, I don't even know.
I don't know. I would assume it's like put back on help features. I don't know.
Yeah, like there's probably a way in the settings. We need to find that out so we could tell people if you want to rewatch whatever the welcome to macOS Catlina is. All right. Good afternoon. Today is Friday, October 11th, 2019. Today we're going to talk about macOS Catlina, Twitter, and as a Mac app, and a lot of other Catalyst apps that we see popping in. There's all kinds of weird and crazy things that are happening. Today, by the way, October 11th, is International Day of the Girl, or International Day of the Girl Child, depending on how you read it. So, welcome to the iMore Show. Joining me today is wonderful, happy, always in a good mood because her job allows her to purge her anxieties. Georgia Dow, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
No, I'm good.
That's a scared smile.
Well, it's kind of the time we're looking for costumes. So, yes. So no, good, very good. I can't say any complaints coming up. How about for you, Lori? Are you feeling good?
I'm feeling good. You know, we had some crazy things happen this week. I don't know if anybody even cares, but on the back end, behind the scenes with Mobile Nations, we were acquired by Future 6-7 months ago, something like that. And we now made an official announcement that the integration is starting sooner than expected, which is good. It's wonderful. We're excited about it. A little nerve-wracking because integrating into a larger company like that, it always brings a lot of fears. What does that mean? What are we going to do? What's going to happen? But I think it looks good for us. So, Renee Ricci of Vector fame. How about you? You look tired.
No, I'm good. It's just, I don't know. It's like, it's already snowing in Winnipeg and the leaves are changing colors here and I'm not ready for winter. I thought once Game of Thrones ended, winter would never come again. But apparently, yeah, it's still on its way.
Winter is always coming. I definitely... Normally, Renee, I feel the same way. I don't like winter hitting so soon, and we don't even have a bad winter. So
no, I was about to say winter for you is like summer 2.0.
Yeah, I know. I shouldn't complain, but I don't usually like winter. But this year, if you recall, I had the roof off of my house for half of the summer, and so I am sick of the heat. I'm sick of the sun. I'm looking forward to some rain and some clouds and some wind. I need some weather around here.
Come visit. We'll take care of all of that for you.
We'll give you enough weather for a week. That's it.
Yeah, for a lifetime.
Yeah. 1 week and you'll be done.
And I'll never want weather again. Yeah.
How do you people live like this? I'm calling the United Nations.
So Steve Perry in the chat also reminded me that today is also National Coming Out Day. So thanks for reminding me of that. Being that I'm a woman, it's always a big deal for me when girls and women get a little bit of highlighting, but you're totally right. National Coming Out Day is also a really big deal for a lot of people in this world. And so lots of love to everybody on National Coming Out Day as well. So thank you. So let's start off with Catlina. Georgia, you are surprising me left and right because you also already installed Catlina. You didn't wait.
Did
you
she?
went for it.
No, actually.
No? Oh,
I was going to say,
No, I didn't. When I was talking about iMessages and the other stuff, no, that was just for my phone. I have not yet installed, and I won't. I know it's horrible.
What are you running? Are you running Mojave even?
Upstairs I am.
Okay, but upstairs here you're not. Downstairs, no.
No, not yet. I really do.
Still?
Wait, I'm just.
Are you running the classic Mac OS? Have you gone to OS?
No. I did update. Oh God, I updated
back in the summer of '08.
Yeah. I just figure why mess with stuff that's already working? I just see everyone else get frustrated when something doesn't work or isn't the way that you expected it or it's moved. And I'm like, if it isn't broken, why fix it?
So let me say two things. First of all, there's nothing wrong with delaying an update, especially when the software is brand new, like Catlina. I think that's smart, actually, for most people. People like Renee and I, we have to kind of jump in really fast. And even Renee tries to delay as long as possible for that exact reason of, I already have all these things working, and if I upgrade, that might mess with my workflow, and I really need these things to work correctly. So for most people, definitely you want to postpone a little bit. But, and here's my little wag the finger at you, Georgia. It's less about whether or not the current operating system already works and more about the security and privacy features, the things that Apple goes in and fixes, the vulnerabilities that take place, that fixes things that we should try to make sure are protected. So in that regard, I'm saying you definitely want to upgrade some of those older operating systems because they're not protected right now. There's lots of vulnerabilities that have popped up in the world, and you can protect yourself a little bit better by upgrading to something that has been. I would say upgrade at least to Mojave 0.2. I think is probably where the last major vulnerability fix took place.
Okay, I'm on Mojave 10.14.6.
Okay, so
then
then
it probably wasn't me. It was probably my hubby that updated the machine when something happened. It probably wasn't me. Though upstairs, when we do the show and we talk about security fixes, I will update for security.
Yes, but good.
That's about it.
Yeah, and I get that, but I have friends who are in the music industry who have recording studios. Then they're running, like Lion or something, like they're running these really old operating systems because they've got, this old program that never got updated or something like that, or like it just works the way it does, and they are not going to risk losing a bunch of money, not being able to record or something like that, and they just kind of stick with what they know. So I get it. Renee, though, you jumped in, you went for it. Again, you usually try to postpone updating because you want to make sure that everything will run your programs well. But this year you actually went for it pretty early on, didn't you?
I usually update my laptop so that I can write the reviews and do all the tests, and I leave my desktop machine alone so I can run all like the Final Cut Pro and everything that I can't afford to. Because there was like one of the betas, it would just quit. Like you just couldn't run Final Cut Pro. And that would be like bedlam for me. So I waited, but then the last week, and I waited like 6 months, I think, for the last one before I updated it. But I switched to editing on my laptop just because the latest generation MacBook Pros are so fast and have so much storage that I didn't need to go back to my desktop all the time. I could edit from the coffee shop. It's been fantastic. But it also meant that I've been using that machine for critical work, and I had to make a decision. Do I not put it on my main machine? Because you never use a secondary machine the same way you use your main machine. Or do I leave it off? And I felt it was unfair to the review if I didn't use it every day. Like I couldn't properly experience both like the good features and so much pain. So I put it on for the last week or 2 weeks. And there was like a lot of things because I think it was right before, maybe it was at the GM. So it wasn't terrible. But like the first few days, Slack was taking forever just to let me type things in. And it's fixed now. Nothing changed. I don't know. Maybe Slack updated. But yeah, I went all in on everything way sooner than usual.
Yeah. And so weirdly, prior to the public launch of Catlina, there was a lot of talk about how Catlina wasn't ready for the public. But in my experience, for the most part, the public launch of Catlina, it actually ended up working a lot smoother than other operating system, Mac operating system update, or at least as good as. I personally haven't really experienced any hiccups that have caused
all fringe this year. Like if you depend on Logic Pro and some of the audio plugins, or if you were a DJ and you needed those XML files, like very specific people got rogered, but good this year. But it wasn't like a general rogering, which we've seen some years.
Yeah, and I suppose that's kind of the give and take of like you either have to make this thing work great for most people or work great for a few people and deal with the glitches later. But in this case, they went with make it work for most people and fix those little glitches for the few.
I have an idea, and I'd love to hear your all opinion on it. I'm beginning to think so I loved 2018 because Apple did half new features and half going back and making everything else as performant and efficient, and just solid as possible. And I love that. And the betas were so good, and the release was so good. And then this year they sort of went back to doing like a bunch of new stuff, and a lot of it broke and it's not out yet, and it's been delayed, or it's been pushed back. I would love it if they sort of got away from doing these monolithic updates like iOS 13 coming this September, macOS Catalina, and instead they did the exact same thing. Like Craig comes out, WWDC, this is macOS Catalina, but it's not coming this September. Release 1 of macOS Catalina is coming, and then every 2 months there's another and I know they do that already with point releases, but it's not really formal. Like nobody really knows what's a point release. But then just use the beta system. Like, oh God, CloudKit isn't working well. Well, we're going to push that to I don't care if CloudKit stays in beta for 2 years if it's rock solid, but to have it like there and then not there and then can't be released and it's causing problems, just get rid of the pressure. Like some pressure is good, but like have like dark, like whatever is nailed, is super rock solid in September, just release that. Release, like polish up some stuff, release it. And then every few weeks we get a couple new features or a couple new updates, and it lasts the whole year. It's a roadmap. It's not a big release. And then the last update comes out in March, a month before you do the next roadmap. I'd be so much happier.
I think it's people like me that stop that from happening. I think that with it being a really big update, a lot of people will be pushed into, we should do this because we get A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Get you with emoji. All you want is your emoji. We'll just give you the emoji update for that.
It has to be a big emoji update. I'm not doing this for one. No, I'm not doing this for one emoji unless it's a unicorn.
Accessibility emoji.
You know what?
Don't say it. Don't you say it.
No, but even that, I might, even if it was accessibility, unicorns, sparkles, I may not, right? Like it's always that a whole bunch of people aren't going to move over. Adorable and cute, but I don't like the time that it comes into doing the update. I don't like that. Usually I think about, for some reason, my phone and my computer, they don't update on their own. They say that I say, okay, yeah, fine, let's update, do it at this time. It doesn't, don't know why. And then I have to go through it. So when I need to use my computer, that's when it's going to be updating, and I don't want to wait. So partially it's that need for something immediate gratification of using my computer when I want to. But I think that that's what's stopping them, because I think that it makes a lot of sense, Renee, to say that we'll do it incrementally and make sure that whatever they are updating works and works really well. That seems like the Apple way to do it. But I would assume it's...
this is so much worse. You got iOS 13. You had to do that. Then you got 13.01, 13.02. Like, it was like 4 updates in the matter of 2 weeks. This can't be better for anybody.
I would argue that they're
I just wait the 6 months, and then by then they've all done them.
And then you're ready. I would argue that they're kind of doing that right now, the same way they're doing with iOS 13. There are some features that are not yet available that we're going to see coming in future minor point updates. For Mac, though, just like Georgia's saying, it becomes, you need your computer to work immediately, and so you want everything to already be ready to go, so that when you hit the download button, you do it once and you're good. Computers are just more important that way to our day-to-day work life. But I think it's a great idea to postpone things that are not perfect until they're perfect, and make sure, that I think, especially in terms of our internals, our softwares, like in the back end workings, like Apple File System, for example. It took a while for Apple to fully integrate that into everything, and they started with making it available right away, and then went, wait, sorry, it's not available for everyone. It's not working right. We're going to take it away from you. We're only going to give it to some of you. Then it's only going to work in certain ways. And it took them, 2 iterations to get it to the point where it is now. For that exact reason, if you can't break my computer, you can break my phone. It's my phone. I got my computer as my backup. You'll fix my phone, but my computer has to work immediately when I wake up in the morning and start typing. I can't have that be postponed, or I can't wait on that. So I'm kind of in both camps. I want it all right away, so I only have to do it once, but I also would rather wait until everything was exactly perfect. So, and if that meant iterations throughout the year, then so be it, in order to make sure that that everything worked perfect when it got into my hands.
Yeah, it seems like this shouldn't be happening in this day and age. Like they should know by then what works and what doesn't. And if it's going to break something, they should have figured that out. Is
Some of
that
it
the
is like,
alphas don't last long enough that they would
well, some of
catch
it is like
everything?
really weird. It's like, for example, the 32-bit stuff, they announced 32-bit transition in 2007. Like they started saying, get your stuff ready in 2007. Okay, we really mean it. We switched the hardware. Now we switch the software. Okay, now like the apps are going to run, but they're going to give you a warning saying this is still 32-bit. And then finally, like Snow Leopard had the first of it. Snow Leopard had the first official build of it. And then like last year in Mojave, it's like, this is, this stuff has to be updated. And some people are like, oh yeah, but I use this old app and the developer's never going to update it and I still use it. And a lot of like music companies just never bothered to, they're always like, oh, we'll do it eventually. And they just never bothered to do it. And 10 years is like a super long runway and they still didn't do it. And sometimes that's on them, but sometimes it's on economic realities and sometimes it's on you. And it's just any transition is going to hurt. Yeah, but I think 10 years is fair. Like I think like there are some things that aren't. But
only stuff that's been 10 years old that doesn't always work when you update.
Or some people it's like Adobe
doesn't do. Like, oh, okay, that sounds fair.
Well, some people do. It's like I have the old version of Adobe that doesn't require a subscription, and Adobe stopped making it 7 years ago, and it's 32-bit. And if I update to Catlina, then I can't run my copy of Photoshop anymore from 2010 or whatever it is. And this is real for that person. But at the same time, like how long do you keep carrying? Like I think Microsoft is still supporting Win32, which in some ways is great, in some ways is terrible.
And I guess that goes back to the do you update kind of argument, which is, excuse me, I can definitely see why if you have, that's an exact example of it's an older program, you use this program, you either you just don't want to upgrade because you don't want to have to deal with like learning something new, or you don't want to switch over to a subscription base like that. Don't update, don't upgrade. Yeah. Because, then you have to change things. You have to change your workflow. And that is a big deal when it comes to computers. It could be 10 years. It could be 100 years. If I'm using, for example, an older version of Adobe that doesn't require a subscription and I don't want to start paying a subscription, I will not upgrade my Mac in order to do it. I will keep it on the older operating system because to me, that's the most efficient way to do that. So yeah, it's a thing. And I don't begrudge anyone who doesn't upgrade because of things like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. When you start blaming Apple, for example, for, no longer supporting 32-bit though, it's not Apple's fault that they're changing, they're growing, they're becoming better. Why should they have to, like you said, Renee, carry people who want to keep using some, 10-year-old app? That's just a personal choice that we would need to make at that point of, do I want to stick with this particular program because this is what I want to use, this is the way I want to use it, or do I upgrade my Mac and then that means I have to switch to a different app? It's definitely more of a personal difference, I think, than it's not Apple's fault. In other words, like they should keep doing what they're doing, and then we make these personal choices ourselves as to whether or not we want to follow through with those upgrades.
So what is Georgia missing, Lori? What would you tell her? Like if Georgia's like, is there any reason I should want to update? Is there anything that you think is compelling?
I love Sidecar so much. It always stands out to me because it's so neat. It's so much fun. It's certainly not a necessity though. It's just like a fun new thing that allows you to have two screens, one for your Mac or Mac laptop and one for your iPad. I've even used it on my iPad mini, believe it or not. It's silly to do something like that, but I've done it. It works. So that's like one of the biggest things I think. If you want to have some fun when you update, that's a way to go. Voice control is also.
Before you switch to voice control, with Sidecar, I could right now take out my iPad, put it down here, move the window of all of us chatting over to there, keep doing like my Final Cut Pro editing here, take my Apple Pencil and like draw funny hats on you and Georgia, and then just keep Final Cutting. Is that the selling point?
That's kind of cute. I have to say that's kind of cute. Would I do it? Probably not. Because I use my computer, like, I don't know. I don't think that for me, I would use that because I rarely work into Windows unless I'm copying something down, doing some paperwork. It's really, really rare. So I don't know if I would need to have it, though it would be kind of cute that I could.
All right, she's got more though.
Yeah. Okay.
So, there's also voice controls on Mac, which is this very intense and robust voice assisted using of your computer. I actually haven't deep dived into it. We have some of our writers on iMore have, and we have some really great everything that voice control can do articles. We'll link them in our show notes. So it's pretty fantastic. So for anybody who wants or needs to use their Mac without using their hands to do it, it's such an like all-encompassing feature. Renee, you've actually had some time to test it, and I know that you have there's some little quirks and some things that don't work perfect.
It's like what I said about the entire thing is that it's just not finished yet. Like it works. Like I can say, do I have it on? I got to double check that I don't have it on. I could say open photos, and photos will open, and then I could say albums, and then I could say show me numbers, and I could say 32 to pick the picture of Georgia, and I could say edit. But like when they showed it off, it was incredibly conversational. It was like Blade Runner. It was zoom, enhance, zoom, enhance, knock it off. It was great, but it doesn't always, like, not all the commands were, or I don't already know what the commands, like the way to say it. So oftentimes like numbers 37, numbers 24, and I'm like using the entire program through numbers, and it works. It's amazing, but it's not as cool as saying edit, rotate, filter, amber. Like it's just not as cool as it could be. So I'm waiting for all of those things, like for me to learn a little bit more about it, but also for it to understand, for all of those things to start working the way I hoped that they would, or the way that they were demoed.
So maybe just cool. like Siri's first iteration, and I'm certainly not arguing that Siri is a whole bunch better, but it is a little better.
It's way better than Siri. It's just, I think it's like, because Siri was consistency. This I just think is not yet fully implemented.
Yeah, and so maybe with just a little more time and a little more use case, maybe they will be able to, Apple will be able to figure out a better way to make that a more conversational way to interact with the computer.
Like their demo was like new email to Georgia, subject, why are you wearing that hat? Body, Georgia, that's a ridiculous hat. Why are you wearing? But like right now it's like subject, and it writes the word subject. So I'm like delete. And so it puts the word delete, and I'm like delete. Then it deletes the word delete subject, and it deletes the word subject. And then I'm like, and like it's doing some of what I want, but not all. And I don't know the difference yet. And that then numbers 47, Georgia, numbers 48. Why are you wearing that hat? Oh.
So it needs a little work. It's there, and the fact that it exists at all, I think, is a really great thing. But it definitely sounds like it needs some extra work. There's a couple smaller, not so they're great that they're there, but they're just sort of little add-ons. Like screen time is now available on the Mac, so you can help control your use of their screens and the use of your children's screens through screen time, and it works across all your devices. You can do it on your Mac, not just on your iPhone or iPad now. There's some security features with Safari. Find My is now part of the Mac. So the Find My on the iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch, they're all now integrated too in the same way on Mac. Probably another one of the biggest features is Catalyst, which is developers' ability to bring their iOS apps and iPadOS apps, now I have to separate the two, to the Mac. So far, it's been slim pickings on what's available, but they're there. They're coming along slowly, and I've had a love-hate relationship with the Mac App Store for a long time because the idea of it is incredible, and I think there needs to be a way to spotlight amazing developers and creators of apps that are used on the Mac, but the App Store still seems to be, it just doesn't seem to work as well as it does on iOS.
Is it because there's just not enough apps?
I don't think that's it. It just doesn't seem to be as compelling to go open all the time. On my iPhone, I'll open the App Store all the time and just like check out what's new. I love reading the news stories. They
So
do
I don't
that
know the
now.
psychology, but maybe because when you're on your iPhone, you have all these intermittent moments where you need stuff to do and it's solving for boredom. Where when you're at your Mac, you're like doing all this busy work and you're not like sitting at your Mac going, I don't know what to do now. Because at that point you have your iPhone in your hand and
Yeah, that could be one of the biggest problems. Is more of a personal use case than anything else. I think when they completely changed the App Store with Mojave, I think that was a huge benefit, and I love the stories that they have in there. I think those are a great way to help discover things. But it's definitely, you know, a little bit harder to enjoy it than the iOS App Store. But with the new apps, where they had a story that I can't find now, which are it's all about the new apps that are now available on the App Store. Let's see. These ones, nope, those are not the ones that I'm looking for. But there's definitely, like, so today, just this morning, Twitter for Mac is now available. For those of us like me, I am not a heavy user of social media. Twitter, I jump into the website once or twice a day. I try to do fun, engaging things, and then I'm done for the rest of the day. So I don't need any of these like third-party apps, though I love them. I use Twitterific on my Mac, and I love it. But it has lots of features that I don't even understand. So for people like me who I just want the Twitter app, that's all I want. Now it's available on the Mac. So that's an example of Catalyst allowing the process of bringing your apps to the Mac a lot easier. I also have been using GoodNotes on Mac recently. That's, it's a great app on iOS and iPadOS. Now you can open and look at, and you can even draw in your GoodNotes apps on your Mac without even, you don't even have to connect it to Sidecar. You can just use your mouse or your trackpad to like draw things on it. So it's just kind of bringing more. I look forward to this more, to finding out how developers are going to take advantage of bringing these Mac apps or these apps over to the Mac, and how is this going to work and how well is it going to be implemented.
And we also have Apple Arcade on the Mac.
Yes. It's funny.
That's kind of interesting because I like playing it on your TV, cool. Playing it on your computer, much cooler than on your iPad and on your phone. My thought. Maybe not. If it runs smoothly.
Do you play video games on your Mac usually, or any PC or anything like that?
I haven't in ages because there are, I used to, but now it's kind of VR or it's mobile. But if I'm on my phone, on my computer, and then I feel like playing a game, I would much rather, while I'm already on my computer, have it there. And then I could maybe sidecar it. Can I then shift it over?
No, you'd be better off playing on your iPad.
You could, but yeah, you'd just be better off playing it on your iPad.
Like, so the whole thing with this, like, this is my favorite concept in the Mac in a long time. This and Swift UI, which I think is going to replace this as the future for cross Apple platform development. But in theory, this is fantastic. But I think this is a multi-year process that we had really high expectations for year one. And it's sort of also like not finished being baked. Like you look at Twitter and it's a good port, like it's Catalyst. They did a good job bringing their iPad app over, but there's just not enough in UIKit yet on the Mac. So they have to bind some stuff from AppKit, the old way of doing it. And some things just don't work. Like their full screen mode is hilarious. And they could have fixed it if they've spent more development resources. But the whole reason to use Catalyst is not to have to spend those resources. And there's just things developers want to do. Like James, friend of the show, James Thompson, has a good blog post up about, he brought his dice game over, and that's great, but he couldn't bring calc over because there's not enough that he needs. And what there isn't always fully documented yet. So I think APFS, it took us a couple of years before APFS was fully implemented. Swift, we're still using a lot of Objective-C. Swift is going to take years before. I think Catalyst is going to be over the next 2 or 3 years. It'll make a lot of sense. But day one, just not everything is there yet. I mean, that's the story of Catlina for me.
Yeah, Catalina is not a day one, I guess.
Yeah.
But these are all steps in the right direction for sure. So, Renee, have you actually played any Apple Arcade games on your Mac?
No, I mean, I did at the demo. And at the demo, I didn't realize it, but like some people have been confused about the control scheme. Like, do they use the keyboard? Do they use the mouse? Do they use an Xbox controller? Because on iOS, almost everything works the way you expect. Like, you touch the screen and things work. On Apple TV, you use the controller and it works. But the Mac is so flexible, and developers didn't really tell you which systems they were implementing. So I think that sort of got lost and they're not in the shuffle, but it fell between the cracks. Is like when the game starts, it should say, get ready on your keyboard, or get that mouse ready, or pick up your game controller and sync it. Because there's so much. The first time I used the very first Android device, I launched the Snake game and it said press up to start. And the first Android device had a joypad, it had an arrow pad, it had like touch gestures, it had arrow keys, and I'm like, which up? And that's how I feel on the Mac. It's like everything else has one option, so it's immediately obvious how to control it. The Mac has all these options. Tell me what to do.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the confusing things to me is that exactly that. So you can play, the same game like, the Way of the Turtle on all of the devices, but the way I play games on different devices is different. On my computer, I use a keyboard and a mouse. On my iOS devices or iPadOS devices, I usually use touch. And on my Apple TV, I use a controller. So having the same game work across all three devices using the same controls seems a little weird because, I'm not touching to move when I'm on my Mac. There has to be another way to implement that. And the controls aren't very clear as to what you should be doing with each system. There's not just an automatic recognition of the computer, recognition of the iPhone or something like that in order to kind of like give you a heads up. Here's how you walk down the street. Here's how you pick something up. You just kind of have to get it wrong until you get it right, and figure that out. So I actually haven't started playing any games on my Mac. I'm not a PC or a Mac gamer. That's just never been what I was into. I have in the past. I used to play World of Warcraft, for example. But these days I'm usually on console or on my iPhone or iPad or Apple TV. So I have not even tested it yet to find out how it works or how well it works. Renee is our best option here. So with all of those major features, Georgia, do any of those make you feel compelled to actually switch, or do you feel like you're still going to hold out a little bit?
Yeah, I'll probably wait until I kind of have to.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you use any reminders and they suddenly stop syncing.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a feature that I found that I really needed, or if
do you use reminders?
Yeah, I do, but mostly on my phone.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't have all of my computers syncing to each other just because I have work computers, and those work computers will sync, and then other computers that I don't have sync. So it's also a little bit messy, which can cause frustration when I want to have my messages transfer over. And then sometimes I don't. But my kids sometimes use my computer. So do I want all of my messages to go onto my computer? Because some of them are private. And so I have to always ask myself those questions, a lot of things. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other fields where that could become an issue, where it's easier, it works better, it's convenient, but it could cause other problems that you're not noticing at the time.
That's actually a really great thing that Apple could maybe try to address at some point. Like our families are always using all of our devices all of the time. And there definitely should be a way that we can protect some things. For example, you don't want your messages to sync across all of your devices, onto your computers, but maybe you want reminders to sync across. Why can't you, pick and choose across that? And I know there are things that you can enable and disable when it comes to like that kind of cross thing, but it's not as easy as, just don't sync my messages, but do sync my reminders. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's a use case for that in the future, especially the more kids are getting into the iPhone game or just phones in general. There's a lot more interacting on all of the devices in the house, and having not just separate user accounts, but ways to protect certain bits but leave others allowing to sync. That's it. Apple, if you're listening, listen to Georgia. She's got some good advice. She's got some good things that she wants to add. Okay, so before we move on, let me tell you a little bit about Thrifter. I would like you guys to jump into thrifter.com and find me a nice, juicy deal that you think is worth talking about. Thrifter is a new way to save money on everything from gadgets to home goods by shopping based on value and not hype. You can sign up at thrifter.com to get thoughtfully selected tech deals from places like Amazon and Best Buy daily without all of the fluff. So are you both on twitter.com thrifter.com right now?
Thrifter.
Thrifter. Do you
As my
see any
friend
deals,
Mark Hamill
Georgia?
would
Do you
say.
see any deals?
There are a few that interest me. Like I like the idea of the quadricopter, but now I'm not sure if I'm actually allowed to use it because of the new Canadian
Nope,
laws
sorry.
on drones.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah.
Renee, go for it.
No, I'm
No.
saying sorry. You can't use any drones anymore. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yep.
see, and I love the idea of it. And it's such a good price. It's like $20.
Yep.
It's a little quadricopter
So
with
sorry.
a little HD camera, tiny, light, and not legal in Canada right now.
Yeah.
But if you're not in Canada,
Sorry.
you should completely grab one because they're a lot of fun. They take great videos. You can get some really cool shots that you can't get with anything else. And then a multi-tool, $8 5-in-1.
I was just
pocket
looking at
knife.
that.
They're
The
always
RAV Tower.
good.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I use like a Leatherman, but it's nice. Like we need more than one whenever we go camping. Because if the kids are using mine to whittle or to try to make something, it always bothers me. So I could have them have this for $8. That's nothing.
There's an iPhone SE for $85, Laura. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And AirPods
If
for
I
$100.
didn't already have one sitting here, I'd be getting them right now. Yeah, there's some great deals on there. Some
That's
absolutely
mind-blowing.
great deals. Yep.
Did Lori
So
see the lightsaber?
I
What?
didn't
There's
see
a
the
lightsaber?
There's a replica Star Wars.
Oh, the Mace Windu Force FX.
Force FX lightsaber.
My favorite one. I love the purple lightsaber.
Oh, does it glow
that's so
though?
great.
I need to know if it glows. If it glows, this is going to be very. Oh, I think it does glow. Oh, bloody well. Yeah, it glows.
Yep. So yes, and these deals are amazing. So my choice for today, in honor of the upcoming Halloween, because Halloween is my favorite time of the year, you can get, and this is an example of, they don't just find the deals that already exist on Amazon. They find the coupon codes that you can use to get that discount. Right now, there is a pumpkin carving kit, an 11-piece pumpkin carving kit that is currently priced at $18.99 on Amazon Prime. There is no discount right now, but thrifter.com has the coupon code. You can get it for $9. If you enter the coupon code that Thrifter found into your Amazon cart on purchase, you can get that for half off. That's pretty awesome. And that's another example of how Thrifter does things. They're not just, oh, look, it's on sale. Guess what, everybody? It's on sale. They're like, oh, wait, there's this private code that we discovered, this secret code to get this discount, to get it at half off. So you definitely want to follow Thrifter, find out what they've got. You can you can sign up for their newsletter where they will send curated articles that are all of the best deals of that day. Again, you can sign up at thrifter.com and jump over to their newsletter sign up. They have a separate one for the UK and the separate one for Canada. So that helps you find deals in your area. So there's the US and general based one, and then a special one for UK, a special one for Canada. So go to thrifter.com for all of your discount needs. Thank you to Thrifter for sponsoring this episode of the iMore Show. Let's get back into it a little bit. I think right now we're going to have to address the elephant in the room. So let's have it out and talk about Apple's involvement in. I was saying before we even got on the show, I'm having a difficult time figuring the best way to appropriately address the subject matter. So Apple's involvement in banning apps that are supporting the Hong Kong protests.
Can I make an attempt? I would just say Apple's capitulation to China with regards to App Store and content availability in China at this point.
Yeah, so it's up in the air right now. It's a big deal. There's a lot of companies that we're finding out. Either it's just already been a really big deal, or it wasn't as big of a deal, but more people are sort of saying, this company's done this company's done that, which is a general capitulation to China on squelching censorship, censoring people, and kind of keeping them people not in China from saying what they want to say about the protest, about the Hong Kong protest. So it's an uncomfortable situation to be in when we at iMore cover Apple, but I don't feel comfortable about the things that they're doing right now in terms of banning apps. And even though, Tim Cook had a memo that he sent to employees about the reason they rebanned the.
Well, can I just talk to that for a second? Because I've never seen that. This was one of the most, like, if I divorce myself from the horror of the.
Can we, for someone that doesn't know, Renee, can you just give a little overview of what happened? Because some people may not be following it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is multifaceted, and a lot of it seemed to come out this week. So most specific to what is happening right now and specific to what is happening with Apple, there was an hkmaps.live website that would tell people in Hong Kong where police action was. Their thinking being, or their stated purpose being, that if people wanted to avoid protests or avoid those areas, they should be able to, if they just wanted to get to where they were going. And they said this is perfectly acceptable under Hong Kong law. They would often put up flags saying, police are involved here if you wanted to make sure you stayed clear. And they made an Android app and they made an iOS app. And the iOS app was rejected at first because Apple said it was counter to Chinese law and the law of many countries, which is saying you can't make an app that tells you that's main purpose is to avoid law enforcement. Then the developer said, I think this is an accident because under Hong Kong law, this is fine. There's no problem with this. The government will tell you where the police are in case you want to avoid them and get from point A to point B without incident. So Apple said, okay, you're right. We'll put the app up. And then most recently, a couple of days ago, Apple took it down again, and they cited concerns from the different Hong Kong security services. And what they said was also user feedback saying that the app was being used to target law enforcement officers, but also to go to areas where there was no law enforcement so that they could target like underprotected areas for harassment or crime or whatever. And the developer pushed back immediately saying, you actually can't use the app for that. It's not fine-grained enough to give you any data about where an actual police officer is. It only tells you where they have large presences. So like you'll know where the riot squad is, but you won't know where like Officer A or Officer B is. And also that tool, there are all sorts of examples of apps that are tools that people can misuse, but just because some people misuse them doesn't mean like, someone can plan a crime in the Notes app. It doesn't mean Notes apps are evil and should be banned. So, that's not an accurate way of portraying our app. And then, some Chinese legislators said the same thing. And there's been pushback. And what I was going to say is there was a memo leaked from Tim Cook, which sort of gave his position on this, stating those things, that they had these concerns about the app. And I have never seen an Apple response come that quickly or be that fragile to push back. Like normally it's like, the Steve Jobs thing where it takes 2 months, you get thoughts on Flash, and even if you disagree with it, you can't really say it's wrong. Like it's factually inaccurate. Or even some of the stuff that Apple did during the FBI backdoor thing, it was always took a long time. It frustrated people with how long it took, but Apple really did. They measured, 3 to 6 times and then put out something that even if you disagreed with it, it on itself was very, very plain language and was accurate unto its own point of view. And this felt like it came out super quickly and was super fragile. Like people teared it apart in minutes, which I cannot recall having happened with like an executive. And this wasn't a public statement, but even like the memos and stuff, can't recall that happening before. And just as a sort of overview, yes, there are a lot of companies that are intertwined with China, companies that are partially owned by China. Apple is in a position where China is their second biggest market, but also where China manufactures a lot of Apple's devices. And Apple put themselves in that position. Apple was one of the companies where decades ago they decided it would be more economical for them to have their stuff manufactured in China rather than somewhere else. So they have created a massive dependency there. And China is not like a lot of other countries. They are governed very differently, and they have very different priorities oftentimes. And I don't think that Apple has any idea how to deal with this right now.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get any better. Like, I think if they pushed back hard immediately, it would have been better for everybody. But the more you let any country dictate, like they stood up to the FBI, like any country dictate your policies, the worse it's going to get. The harder it's going to be to say no, and the bigger things they can ask. And China is not shy. Like we talked before on other shows about how the Justice Department or the EU courts will try to regulate technology. But those courts have huge processes and very transparent processes. And you can see what's happening. You can send lawyers, you can argue, you can make cases, you can appeal. This has come down to like anonymous newspaper articles saying that, you know, China's feelings are hurt over a certain app, or they have concerns over a certain app. And the biggest companies in the world are spinning on a dime. And there's no process, there's nothing covering that. And that's not a tenable position for anybody to be in. And I had a sort of a wrap-up point to it, but I totally forgot it as I was dealing with all that stuff. But it's really concerning.
It really is, and Renee, I agree with you so much, and not in some ways too. Apple, like again, there's a lot of companies that are a part of the same kind of thing, but because of what we do for iMore, we're going to focus a little bit more in on Apple. They're in a position, like you said, in an awkward position of one of their largest profit-making countries is China, and also where they manufacture most of their goods is China. So they've got, both hands and feet in that cookie jar. What do they do? But I think at the same time, there, to stand on your moral high ground as a company that big, if the Chinese government is telling Apple, pull this app down or we're going to kick you out of our country, then Apple can fight right back and say, go ahead, see what happens to your country, because we're that big over there. You need us as much as we need you. Let's take this fight out and see what really happens. And it's that sort of platform to me of when you're big enough and have a loud enough voice, you should be using that voice. You shouldn't be kowtowing to somebody in order to protect your relationship with them. You should stand up for what's right. And I say this on Apple's defense because everything that we love about Apple is about the way they stand up against oppression, and the way they openly talk about how important it is to protect individual humanity. And then in this case, they're not making that stand. They're not standing up against this. And whether or not you use government laws or not to make your decisions based on, about what is or isn't done, they are not making any kind of open stand or stance against anything. They're just kind of keeping their mouth shut. And that's very frustrating to me to see, knowing that they have many times in many other situations openly come out and said, they've taken a stand and they said how they feel about things. Why aren't they doing that with the Hong Kong protests? With what's going on?
They also took the Quartz app off of the store in China. And luckily, I say luckily in the most ironic sense of the word, the way China is doing it is creating a massive Streisand effect, but they might get smarter about that in the future. So that's something to be super careful about as well.
Yeah. I think that, in this case, and probably really strongly so, and because the memo that Tim put out came out openly, it shows that they knew. This was a knowing choice that they made, that they were going to choose to put profits over people. And it's really disheartening because Apple is a company that has really stood up to governments when they were not autocratic regimes, for standing up for what is right over what would be more profitable, and taken a hit because of that. That being said, Apple's investments and revenue from China is stated, at least by Forbes, to be in the area of $43 billion. They made $9 billion last quarter off of China. So this is a lot of money. And I think that if Tim Cook had written about it more honestly, because let's say it, the people that are mainly being targeted are the protesters themselves, and this was keeping them safe. And so if he had said, listen, this is, 1/3 of our revenue, and we are unable for this apps case to be able to pull out all of our 90% of their, not marketing, but when the manufacturing is done in China, and 20% of their revenue comes directly from there, and probably more when you put everything else into it, that becomes really difficult. And I'm sorry, but in this case, we can't do anything. At least I would feel like heartened that people could then go after the shareholders and say, and if he had said, listen, if the shareholders don't mind, we would like to take a stand, but my hands are tied if not for them backing us. And I think that would have put pressure on the shareholders to make sure that they made choices that were not about profit, but were about people. And so I think that he was put in a bad position. He tried to not have it come out for the reasons that they did it, but because of his statement, that he knew exactly what was happening, and that it was, the bottom line just didn't make sense for one app. And I think that if he had not have come out with any message at all, probably we wouldn't have known. And us being, an Apple site, we probably would have went, oh, it's probably just another error. It's okay. Apple would have never done this. So in some ways, I'm kind of happy that it came out, because then we can really take a look more honestly at what happens right now all around the world. And it's easy for us to stay when our bottom line is not going to be impacted by that amount by making a stand. So it makes it really easy for us to judge Apple on that, the choice that they had to make. But also I think that the entire way that our ecosystem runs maybe needs to be looked at. But yeah, maybe if it was my company, I would have made the decision that, I would hope that I wouldn't have made.
That also in the chat room is just saying, doesn't Tim Cook, Apple and Tim Cook have a stated doctrine of wanting to engage in areas with people who they disagree in order to affect change. The only issue is that engagement becomes appeasement at a certain point, and it's really hard to see the line. And China has already said, and China's not alone, France, other countries have already said, for example, they want iCloud data stored locally. They don't want the data for their citizens to be stored in another country under the control of another government. And America wouldn't want their iCloud data stored in China either. Fair enough. But, if the US comes to Apple and says, we want a backdoor like the FBI did, Apple knows exactly how to litigate that issue. If China comes to them and says, we want the iCloud keys, which they don't have right now, as far as we know, or they say we want a backdoor into iOS, which the FBI has done, but which China, as far as we know, hasn't done, I know how Apple's going to fight the FBI. We've seen it. I don't know how Apple fights China on that. And I don't know how they fight it when China is taking away pieces every time. There will be a line, but it becomes harder and harder to see it and harder to defend it with every capitulation.
You see, the hard part, the sad part of all of this is we actually now see how Apple is going to deal with it when China asks for something. And this was for an app. So if they will do this and take a hit, and I guess they probably don't know how much this is going to, go through the media, though it's everywhere right now. And because Apple's such a big company, if Apple can't stand up to China, then do we have any hope that any other country or company would?
They aren't. They're like, I didn't want to bring, but like we've seen with the NBA, we've seen with Blizzard. What was the game company that Blizzard.
Activision.
Blizzard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Activision owns. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's exactly, that speaks to
they
the
won't do
larger.
it because
Wear his
if
jacket
they,
in Top Gun because they didn't like the flags on the back of the jacket. I mean,
Yeah.
But
It
but
speaks.
that's the thing, is that if they didn't do it for an app, they want to have the keys, and Apple can get them. They will. They won't say anything, and China won't say anything, so we would never know. But
I think it would come out. Like, we won't know the minute that it
I
happens.
don't know if it would come out, Renee. I really don't know if it would come out. Apple's pretty good at keeping secrets most of the time. And if less people know, then the chances of it coming out, I think that it's really naive to think that Apple couldn't keep that secret if only very few people know about it.
Yeah, I don't. Well, no, I think that those kinds of things are the stuff that does come out. I mean, that's why we see it blow up so often.
No, like you can see with Snowden how long it takes for something to come out. And if he hadn't have come out, it would have probably been another decade before anyone knew anything. Anyways.
I think this speaks to the larger issue with this global economy that we're in, that we, so far everything has been like growing and growing and growing, and isn't this amazing how much it's growing? And now we are facing something where one country's moral standing is different than another country's moral standing, and how are we dealing with it? And from the United States perspective, we stand on this freedom of speech ideology that nobody should ever be arrested or put in jail because of what they feel and what they believe in, and then here we are seeing something that's happening in another country where, from our standpoint of what we believe in, which is this freedom of speech, there is a government who is trying to stop that freedom of speech to us in the United States. And it's working. And that is very
money is more important than freedom of
me.
speech. That's exactly what we're saying right now.
Yeah, it's very frightening to me.
And just to be clear, like the EU is trying this through a regulation process. They want to say that if you're not allowed to say something in an EU country, you can't say it anywhere in the world, which is another totally scary. But again, in the EU, we know what the mechanisms are. This is sort of like, you hurt our feelings, and now the NBA wants to burn their players. It's something very, very different.
And very scary, because if we in the United States and other countries that do have that sort of freedom of speech kind of ideology, if we're going around saying we're, freedom of speech, yeah, and then we actually squelch that freedom of speech because another country wants us to do it because of our financial investment in that is censorship through finance. That is terrifying. That we would do something like that we would kowtow to something like that. Not just Apple, but all of the companies that are in this current situation. And I think that's like the greater conversation to be had is, we are global now. The world interacts with each other and does commerce with each other on a global scale now. That's just the way it is. So how do we all in our own individual countries deal with those kinds of things?
Interesting too, because like a lot of people feared the control of corporations in the future, that Facebook or Google or Apple or those companies would be so big, and they're not bound by any sort of laws. If you you can litigate them, but like they can have morality clauses, and they can have all sorts of things that control what you can. Like if you work for a company and you tweet something they don't like, you can be fired. But we also have countries that own corporations or are corporations or invest in corporations. And Sezbom in the chat room, I don't know if he's trolling. He seems like a troll account. That why are we trying to impose our values on another country? That's the opposite is happening right now, because through financial means, other countries are imposing their values globally.
And that's actually
the convo. That's all.
And but that actually is exactly what I mean, which is, my country has this belief, some other country has a different belief. So how does a company from my country interact with a person from a different country and their beliefs? I don't know, because we haven't been global
in a global environment. Yeah, it's exactly that.
And that's literally what we're doing right now. Is I'm not saying that. Well, actually, I do think that like we should start trying to impose our beliefs when that belief is better for humanity. But that's a completely different conversation. That's way off of the very specific, which is, you're exactly right. I'm not saying that we should be imposing our beliefs on other countries. I'm saying, how do these global companies deal with different belief systems in different places? And here we are faced with how to do that, because Apple and the NBA and Activision, they're not trying to impose United States beliefs on China. What they're doing is they are kowtowing to the Chinese government's ability to censor and suppress a conversation. We're doing what they want us to do. And that's what's scary to me, is that we are allowing a different country to influence how we interact with our own.
That this isn't entirely new. I mean, there were famous controversies in the past, like for example, when BlackBerry would put squid servers in Singapore or some other countries, to basically allow those countries to eavesdrop on BBM conversations. And some people were outraged, and BlackBerry's like, well, we have to do it in order to stay in business in these countries. And yeah, and I apologize to Sesbom if I was overacting there. It is incredibly complicated, and there are no answers to these things yet because we've never had to deal with it. I mean, it was hard enough for us to have different counties in the same state and different states in the same union, and all these different countries that have come together after World War II and broken apart after World War II to find common ground. And what we're finding, the only reason why I'm depressed by this is that how fast we will exchange principle for money.
Yeah.
And I usually, you can tell that, like a principle isn't a principle if it's based on finance, if it's based on being easy. It's when it's hard. And I don't, I'm like Georgia and Lori, I don't know if this, if I had a responsibility to millions of jobs and to shareholders and to all of this, and someone came and said, these are the two terrible situations you're in. You either do A and this is how you suffer, or you do B and this is how you suffer, how I would make those choices. But I think there is value in transparency and saying why I'm making these choices. And if the answer is, I know A sucks, but B also sucks, therefore I'm doing A for these reasons, I think that's more understandable than either not saying anything or trying to find other answers to the
but that's
problems.
why I think that our job is so important, is that if you stray far enough from the line, we are going to hold you accountable, even if it isn't something that you want to hear. Our job, and the wonderful thing about having a free media is that we can have this debate. And even if it's a company that we love, and everyone knows we love Apple, and usually I can also say that I'm very proud of Apple. And when it's not that case, and there's a decision that could be questionable, we are going to have a discussion about that, so that we're kind of holding your feet to the fire, and we're going to keep you honest about what you have stated and what you have done. Because Curtis in the chat room speaks about how Apple was trying to, make change from inside of the country in hopes that they can, really impose their values by making sure that they pay their workers enough and deal with that. But you know what? Sometimes, putting money into an infrastructure where there are still human rights abuses that are going on, and dealing in trade may not, perhaps, and I'm not sure that I have the answer, but maybe that isn't the best way. Maybe it's, if you're doing things right and you're upholding to values that human rights matter, then we'll put money into an infrastructure, and we're going to do it in a way that we find is tasteful, instead of leaving this horrible taste in all of our mouths.
Yeah. So thank you to Renee and Georgia for talking with me about this. And just a quick note to everyone in the chat room right now, and to everybody that listens to this episode. We understand that this is a very sensitive subject. And we talked before we even got into this show today about whether or not we were even going to address it. But it is so up in the air that it does become the elephant in the room that you're trying to avoid talking about. So we felt like it was important to talk about. And no matter what your feelings are about it, no matter what side you take, no matter what you think is right or wrong, what's going on right now is creating a dialogue that hasn't happened so far, which is, how do these global companies deal with being global companies, whatever their country of origin is in? And so we appreciate you listening to us, even if you don't agree with our opinions. And, that we don't always get into matters like this. We usually try to avoid them because they're not as fun as all the fun Apple stuff. But every once in a while, you really do have to kind of have that moment and talk about it. So we appreciate that. And you can, chat with us on Twitter about your feelings more. You can send us emails if you want. We may or may not respond depending on how fiery our feelings are about stuff, because we do get it. It's politically driven, and it's very difficult to talk about, and we don't even know the right ways to talk about it. We're just opening up a dialogue, and hopefully this opens up a dialogue for everyone who's listening too, amongst your friends and families, about, what you think is the right way for these global companies to deal with these global situations. And at some point, this stuff will need to be addressed, amongst these companies. And this is how it starts. We start having these conversations, and then
the one thing I really
action
missed
starts happening.
I was listening to the Script Notes podcast. It's a podcast for writers. It's really good. And John August and Craig Mazin, the two hosts, they had fiercely different political views on the WGA elections and how their negotiations were going. And they had the most adult conversation about it. Like, they didn't have any personal attacks. They didn't hate each other of their different views. They understood the different points of view. They just simply disagreed and were able to articulate why and it was so refreshing to hear. And it reminded me about how rare it is. Like, it feels like these days, maybe it's been that way for a long time, for people to just actually have arguments, not like fights or personal attacks or, extremist, but like actual, like classical arguments, like just, there was this also great moment. I was watching Tom Cruise, Robert Downey Jr. He was being interviewed on Howard Stern's show, and he said that I don't agree with everything that you say, but when you say a different opinion, I love how you articulate it. And I really wish for everyone, like on Twitter, everywhere, that we could get back to that, where I could say, like, I believe in B because of blah blah blah, and I support your right to believe that, and I listen to you even if we disagree. At the end of the day, like the wolf and the sheepdog in those Bugs Bunny cartoons, we can like fight fiercely and then shake hands and go grab a beer.
Yeah. That's definitely the way the world should work. Yes. So to completely shift gears, we're actually almost over, but I want to end on a happy note. I want to end on a note where we're talking about tech a little bit. Have either of you heard of or purchased the Tim cookware?
What? What is this?
So if you're in front of a computer right now, hop on over to timcookware.com and discover these hilarious. It's a collection of wood-based kitchenware. So there's a cutting board, a couple of spoons. There's a
are these officially
rolling
licensed?
pan? I'm sure they're not. I'm sure they're going to have to be taken down soon. There's a hat. There's a cheese grater, aka the Mac Pro. It's just a cheese grater.
His face is on it all.
Yeah, it's adorable and hilarious.
God.
And if you're a fan of Apple products,
a cheese grater. It is really. You're absolutely right. It's
the cheese grater. It doesn't even have anything on it that represents Tim
special.
Cookware.
I bet it's spelling for like 17 times the price. I need to know the cost. It's a $50
and it's just a cheese grater.
It doesn't even have the rubber on the bottom. It is a $50.
Does it have a stand? Is there a stand? How much
No,
the wheels cost?
there's no wheels. There's no wheels. It's $50. It's like a $2 cheese grater. It doesn't even like just buy it. Go to the dollar store, buy a cheese grater, and call it the Tim Cookware cheese grater. Oh, jeez.
The description summary says the design and exorbitant price of the Mac Pro with none of the functionality.
That's
pretty
adorable.
Funny. So I believe
the hat. The hat is my favorite.
Yeah, I think a lot of if you watch the little buy notification that pops up, a lot of people are buying the hat. I believe the designer of these products, his name is Charles Kerr. So thank you for giving us this hilarious and fun little thing to add to our life. It's pretty hilarious.
And the hat is half the price of the cheese grater. Just gonna say, well worth it.
Yep. They're even packaged into funny little naming things. If you get the entire set, it's called the 11 Pro Max. It's just great. It's a fun little thing. I love it. The 11 Pro doesn't come with the cookbook. I wonder what's in the cookbook. I need to know what's in the cookbook real quick.
That's adorable.
It doesn't even say. Yeah. So yeah,
that stuff.
I thought that would make you all happy. So do either of you have any more? This week was a surprisingly slow week in terms of Apple news. I think a lot of it was, it's all about Catlina this week. So any other specific thing that you want to pop in and talk about real quick before we end the show?
I'd like to just know everyone's suggestions, and you can send them to me. But I'm looking for new watch bands and a new case, because whenever I get a new phone, I'm really excited about the new cases that are out there. I want one that, has like cool stand, or I was wanting ones that were squishy. They had like liquid crystals inside of them, and you could actually squeeze them and the crystals moved. They don't have it for the new one yet. Anything weird and wonderful, I would love to know, and maybe we can like go over them if we have time next week.
Next week, definitely. I already have a couple of suggestions for you. So
wait.
Yeah, we could talk next week. Renee, you have any things that you want to talk about before we end the show today?
No, just that I'm honored to do the show with you guys every week. It is so great.
Yes, I really do enjoy our times on Fridays. We always, sometimes I wake up in the morning thinking, what are we going to talk about today? And we always end up having great, robust, wonderful conversations. And maybe next week, Renee and I will actually, one of the things on the list was to talk about Disney Plus versus TV Plus at launch. So stay tuned for that, because I do want to talk about that with Renee. I think we both have very different ideas on it. So it'll be a fun conversation.
Why Georgia hates right of repair. It'll be a great week.
Some other controversial statement. Annie from the chat room said that they got the Apple Watch bands last time from Thrifter. Good job.
Oh, awesome.
yes. Annie, get real quick before we go. John, did you like them? Are they good? It was like 6 bands for $6 or something amazing
really
like
good
that.
Price.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, such a great buy.
She loved them. Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so thank you again to everyone. And again, thanks for everyone that it comes into the live show with us. It's great to see you. It's great to have these conversations with you. Even if we don't get to address every single one of them, we try to read through as we go. And happy Canada Thanksgiving, by the way. Yes, that's right. Renee will be probably not taking Monday off for Thanksgiving, even though I think you should. So happy Thanksgiving. I plan on cooking a turkey on Monday in solidarity with my Canadian cohort. So yeah. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And thank you again to Jim Metzendorf for all the great things that you do to make us sound good and to make us work good. I coughed a couple times. Renee coughed a couple times. So I know you'll be good at making sure the rest of the world doesn't have to hear us do that. So thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners. We do this every week for you. As much as we love each other's beautiful faces, we also love knowing that you're listening in to what we're talking about. And have a great rest of the week.